following video is not made for kids. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello to my subscribers, this is the TF Geek coming to you with what will hopefully be a successful review, and today we're going to be time traveling back 10 years ago, wow, I can't believe it's been a decade, to the year 2015. Hasbro has released a new subline of the Transformers Generations line called Combiner Wars, and unknown to Transformers fans and collectors at the time in 2015, Combiner Wars would be the first line that would start a trend of having sublines of the overall Transformers Generations line being released in trilogies. Combiner Wars would eventually be joined with Titan's Return and Power of the Primes and forming the Prime Wars trilogy. After that, the next trilogy would be the War for Cybertron trilogy with the three sublines of Siege, Earthrise, and Kingdom, which rebooted the Generations line, not being a direct continuation after Power of the Primes was released in 2018. And then the most recent trilogy that wrapped up from the subline of Generations was the Legacy trilogy. There was Legacy Year 1, released in 2022, Legacy Evolution in 2023, and Legacy United in 2024. The next subline of the Transformers Generations line is being called Transformers Age of the Primes. Whether or not it'll be a new trilogy or not, it is uncertain at this point, but with the successes of the Prime Wars trilogy, War for Cybertron trilogy, and Legacy trilogies, the trend of the Generations line being trilogies once every 3 years, it's probably a trend that will continue for the next decade. But in the meantime, I'm back in 2015 during the Combiner Wars line. One size class of Transformers figures that were kind of the oddball class, since they technically weren't combiners, they were just used to continue the leader class size into the Combiner Wars line. And that's because they weren't actually combiners, but one figure that stood out from the rest, at least for me it did, since it's an action figure of one of my all-time favorite Transformers characters, it was this figure right here, who's just dropped one of his laser guns since he cannot hold it. Hold it due to how the trigger was designed, but see if I can get it like that. Nope. Anyways, today so one of my favorite figures from the Combiner Wars line was Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, and continuing the trend from the line that Combiner Wars succeeded, which was the Thrilling 30 Transformers Thrilling 30 Generations line that had actually lasted 2 years from 2013 to 2014. I just realized there's a dead spider living in the back of my Ultra Magnus action figure. Ugh, creepy. Anyways, this version of Ultra Magnus is based on his appearance from IDW's comic books, more so than his Generation 1 counterpart. Evidence of this can be seen by the fact that his shoulder towers are much larger than Generation 1 Ultra Magnus. He keeps dropping his weapons, so I'm going to just set them off to the side for now. But Ultra Magnus ended up being one of the characters in IDW's comic books who was given a WTF jaw-dropping moment when it was revealed in one issue. That was one thing IDW was doing throughout the 2010s, is they were trying to make jaw-dropping stories that would make Transformers fans go, "What? I can't believe they actually did that." And for Ultra Magnus, it was ultimately revealed that years ago, when the war between the Autobots and the Decepticons broke out, Ultra Magnus actually died, and his lifeless body was reconstructed and was turned basically into a piloted mecha, not unlike the Gundams. And the latest Autobot to don Ultra Magnus's persona was a tiny little Autobot named Minimus Ambus. And that was quite a jaw-dropping experience for Transformers fans to read in IDW's comic books, where multiple Autobots had actually held Ultra Magnus's identity after the original died. And essentially, Ultra Magnus, with that plot twist reveal in IDW's comic books, Ultra Magnus basically was a heroic version of the Dread Pirate Roberts, who is the only fictional character I can think of where multiple individuals take on the same persona. But you get the idea for that. Now, for me personally, one thing that I didn't like about Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, and this is something that continues to this day with my own personal taste, the hubcaps on his wheels were originally unpainted black plastic, and a few years ago I tried to custom paint my Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus's hubcaps wheels, but I made the mistake of tearing the wheels off, and I don't know how you can see it, but if you look here inside Ultra Magnus's wheels on the back of his legs, on his heels, by his heel spurs, the wheels are just pegged on in place. They aren't held on with metal clips or anything. So I accidentally broke the teeny tiny little clips that were holding the wheels in place, and so I tried to stuff the holes with tissue paper and Scotch tape to try and see if I could get them attached on. They did reattach successfully, but the wheels no longer spin as freely as they used to, and at one point some of the silver paint I was applying accidentally smudged, and when I tried to clean it I used nail polish remover, and so this tire, as you can see, the nail polish remover started to remove the plastic off the surface of the tire itself. So yeah, my copy of Combiner Ultra Magnus, in my quest to custom paint him and actually make him look better, I accidentally ended up damaging the figure. So a couple of weeks ago, I was browsing Amazon to see if there were anyone was selling, if there were any scalpers selling Combiner Ultra Magnus at what I felt was a decent price, and even though I'm still debating if I should get a replacement copy of Combiner Ultra Magnus someday, I found the next best thing. I was amazed to find that on Amazon, a couple of weeks ago, going for a cheaper price than Hasbro's Combiner Ultra Magnus was the figure we are going to be looking at in this review. So yes, the title of the video is not clickbait. It's not a misnomer. I wasn't incorrect. Today, this review is going to focus on the Takara Tomy exclusive Transformers Legends LG Ultra Magnus figure. So this is the Takara Tomy Japanese release of Combiner Ultra Magnus. It has a paint job that more closely resembles Ultra Magnus's appearance in the Generation 1 series versus the paint job he had in IDW, which is what Hasbro's version went for. The parts on Combiner Ultra Magnus are slightly dulled off-white, while on Takara Tomy's Legends Ultra Magnus was LG-14, the 14th figure released in the Legends line. It's pure white, and some other noticeable differences are the laser guns, as you can see there inside the box that Takara Tomy's Ultra Magnus comes with. They're white versus Hasbro's Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, where they look black at a distance, but if I actually it's hard to tell, but if I actually compare them to something black, such as trying to find something black nearby. If I turn the screen on my phone off, if I hold them, oops, my screensaver. If I hold them right in front, it's kind of hard to see, but the plastic used here for Combiner Ultra Magnus' laser guns, they aren't actually black. It's actually a very dark greenish brown. And so that's a very clever optical illusion on Hasbro's part, casting these in very dark greenish brown plastic and making it look like they're black. It's the same thing with the wheels on Ultra Magnus's alt mode. It's actually dark green plastic instead of pure black plastic. But another noticeable difference here before we get the figure out of the box is that if you look right up in there, the partner robot that comes with Takara's Legends LG Ultra Magnus is actually Alpha Trion instead of Minimus Ambus. That's because in Japan, IDW's comic books haven't been as popular as they've been here in the US. I don't know if there's any Japanese translations of IDW's comic books, but yeah, that's one of the key differences, is that this version of Ultra Magnus is piloted by Alpha Trion. And so this was, since this was released in 2015, a few months after Hasbro released the North American version of Ultra Magnus in the Combiner Wars line. And this technically was the first transforming Alpha Trion figure that wasn't sold exclusively at BotCon, since it came out a year before Titan's Return Alpha Trion did. But yeah, since this was a Takara Tomy exclusive, Ultra Magnus's paragraph-long bio and most of the other important information, such as the number of steps it takes for him to transform from his robot mode to his vehicle mode, it's all in Japanese. The words vehicle mode are some of the few words written in English, so every Transformers figure released in the Transformers Legends line contained a comic book that was more of like a comedy manga than anything else. Also, some of the designs of the characters and the stories were absolutely goofy, and it's come to my attention in more recent years that in Japan, Takara Tomy has always treated the Transformers characters more on the comedic side than anything else, so that's probably why the Transformers franchise Eyes has been taken more seriously in the United States than it has in Japan. But yeah, here's Transformers Legends Ultra Magnus inside the box. Because it is brand new, I am going to open it up, but yeah, the average aftermarket price that this version of Ultra Magnus goes for, Hasbro's version from what I saw on Amazon, the average aftermarket price for these figures, Hasbro's Ultra Magnus is about, fluctuates between $150 to $200, and it was more $200 when I was browsing Amazon for a replacement Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus figure, and the Takara's LG Legends Ultra Magnus figure was going for just $150, so $50 less. I figured, why not get the Takara Tomy version? So it's a different paint job, and I'll show off the differences and similarities between the two of them once I get him out of the box. But yeah, here he is inside the box, packaged in robot mode. Image of his alt mode, and there's Alpha Trion as well. Alpha Trion's up there in the corner of the box along with the white laser guns. Transformers logo. This was typical style packaging for the Transformers figure sold in Takara's Legends LG line. There's Takara's logo for the 30th anniversary of the Transformers. It's got 30 years written in gold letters along with a silver Autobot logo on it. On it you got some artwork of Ultra Magnus here on the side of the box. And just like the Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus figure, his two laser guns along with the missile pods that are on the shoulders, they can combine into the Magnus hammer that Ultra Magnus wielded for the first time in the Transformers animated series. There's some artwork of Alpha Trion, and I love how they have his beard flowing, even though on the figure it doesn't do that, but that is a nice touch to see there. So yeah, if there's anyone having any doubts, yeah, this version of Ultra Magnus is just a mecha suit that's actually piloted by Generation 1 Alpha Trion. There hasn't been much middle ground with Hasbro, with Takara Tomy deciding to repaint Minimus Ambus into Alpha Trion. The attitude I've seen from most Transformers fans and collectors is they either completely love or completely hate the idea of Ultra Magnus actually being piloted by Alpha Trion in secret. But of course, in the IDW's comic books, Minimus Ambus did reveal that he was the latest in a series of small-sized Autobots that had been controlling Ultra Magnus's body. So you could imagine this figure instead of Alpha Trion, if you're OCD about not liking Alpha Trion controlling Ultra Magnus's body, then you can imagine that it's another Autobot like Minimus Ambus, or you can imagine it's Minimus Ambus himself in Alpha Trion's colors, if you're inclined to do so. But yeah, that's really great. Here on this side of the box, you've got an overhead shot of Ultra Magnus's vehicle mode. This laser gun stores best on this side. There's the other missile pod. And yeah, overall, pretty impressive looking action figure. I do admit, right off the top, there's no questions barred, no doubt about it. The Takara Tomy version of Ultra Magnus has a lot better paint apps than Hasbro's Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus figure. One thing that was common at the time, and I believe it's still common with Takara Tomy released Transformers figures today, is that instead of putting the figure on a plastic tray and having plastic tie-downs hold it in place, they just, Takara Tomy goes the extra mile and puts it inside a plastic clamshell box. So it's a lot more secure, and there's even you can see right there with the light reflecting from my bedroom lamp, there's a bubble dome protecting Ultra Magnus's entire head and chest plate, so it actually makes him look like an astronaut with that. But yeah, jokes aside, I do not regret getting the Takara Tomy version to replace my Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus figure, and one of the reasons I did all this and why I started the review with the backstory on this figure is because until which I still have in the box, until, hopefully I can successfully point at it, the Studio Series 86 Commander Class Ultra Magnus action figure, which came out last year in 2024, before that figure was released, this right here, Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, it was the physically tallest and largest modern Ultra Magnus action figure to be released by Hasbro. I think the title for largest Ultra Magnus action figure of all time, I believe that title is still held by the Masterpiece Ultra Magnus action figure. I don't know the size differences between Masterpiece Ultra Magnus and Studio Series 86 Ultra Magnus, but yeah, this until the Studio Series 86 figure was released was the tallest Ultra Magnus action figure that was released by Hasbro. I believe the Studio Series 86 Ultra Magnus, I saw a couple of reviews when it came out last year, and I saw some photos on the internet where people brought out Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus for a size comparison with Studio Series 86 Ultra Magnus. I believe they're the same height, but Studio Series 86 Ultra Magnus, I believe he's slightly bigger. He's slightly bigger than Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus. A lot of Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus' height is the tall shoulder towers that he had in IDW's comic books and Ultra Magnus is actually the shortest leader class figure that was in fact released in the Combiner Wars line because his height goes to his shoulder towers. But putting him off to the side, that's the main reason why why I'm making this review. Why I got this figure in the first place was to replace this figure. Until the day when or if I get a second copy of Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, I will hold on to this one. But just to have a version of this mold in my Transformers collection for now, I'll utilize Takara's Legends Ultra Magnus figure. This mold has been used 3 times. In addition to these 2 versions of Ultra Magnus, Combiner Wars, and Legends LG, there was a 3rd version that was released in the Platinum Edition line in 2016, and I believe it was known as the Platinum Edition Autobot Stand 5-pack, and the version of Ultra Magnus in that 5-pack was given a paint job much more based on his appearance in the Transformers Generation 1 cartoon, so instead of this like a light blue plastic used here on the Combiner Wars version, the Platinum Edition Ultra Magnus has a much darker blue version. I believe it's slightly darker than the more solid blue used on the Legends Takara version of Ultra Magnus. Yes, but yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say. Hey, when you know the backstory behind these figures, there's a lot to talk about them, but apart from that, if you don't really know the backstory behind these, then pretty much the main things to talk about are the similarities and the differences between Hasbro and Takara Tomy's release. Back in 2015, during Combiner Wars, the last thing I'll say, since I babbled on long enough, is that this was at a time back in 2015 when Hasbro and Takara Tomy were releasing different versions of the same character and the same action figure. Hasbro released versions. Hasbro gave paint jobs to the North American released figures based on the either the action figures that the characters originally had years ago, or if they were comic book characters such as Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, they were given paint jobs based on their appearances in the Transformers comic books, while Takara Tomy tended to go with cartoon accuracy. So for Generation 1 characters like Ultra Magnus, they went with the appearances they had in the Transformers Generation 1 cartoon, and because Minimus Ambus was a character originally created for IDW's comic books, that's one of many reasons why Takara Tomy repainted Minimus Ambus into Alpha Trion, because it was the character that appeared in the G1 cartoon that looked the most similar to Minimus Ambus. As far as where I stand on Ultra Magnus being piloted by Alpha Trion, I personally don't care. I don't mind it because there's action figures of Alpha Trion that are far few. One thing I personally did after I was able to get this figure and I got it in my collection is I did my own headcanon, my own fan and story where instead of Ultra Magnus being the lifeless body being piloted by Alpha Trion, instead Alpha Trion is actually the lifeless body and Ultra Magnus is storing Alpha Trion's body in the chamber where he would normally store the Matrix of Leadership. He modified it to be slightly bigger to fit Alpha Trion's body, and he's basically holding on to it until the time when Alpha Trion is needed again, and to emerge, and to either be brought back to life or give wisdom to Optimus Prime and all the Autobots instead of just doing it from beyond the grave through the Matrix of Leadership. But please let me know down in the comment sections what you think of that idea, where instead of Alpha Trion being the pilot and Ultra Magnus is the lifeless body, instead it's Ultra Magnus who's housing a lifeless body, the lifeless body of Alpha Trion inside of him. Just whatever you prefer, please let me know down in the comment section. So, the box is slightly dented. One thing that Hasbro did have up over Takara Tomy is that the cardboard on the boxes was much thicker on Hasbro's boxes back in 2015 versus the ones Takara Tomy released. east. So as you can see, after 10 years of not being open, the box on this copy of Ultra Magnus that I got off of Amazon, the box has warped to where the tape is holding it shut. But it's not ripping apart on the sides, but there is wear and tear on the corners of the box, as you can see right there. So yeah, it's very thin, flimsy cardboard. So that's one thing where Hasbro did have Takara Tomy beat. As you can see, even right, I don't know how you can see, but right here, the plastic bubbles, the plastic surface has peeled off the front of the box. So that's one thing Hasbro did have Takara Tomy beat when they released separate versions of the Transformers action figures in the United States and Japan, was better quality cardboard on the boxes the figures actually came packaged in. Personally, I actually enjoy. A lot of collectors were annoyed when Hasbro and Takara Tomy announced that they were going to be releasing the exact same action figures in both Japan and the US, and the days of having two different painted versions of the same action figure were over, since Hasbro and Takara Tomy wanted to make the Transformers franchise more uniform, was the term they announced to the public. But let's just face it, they wanted to keep, they did it to keep costs down and make the action figures cheaper to purchase. Me personally, I didn't mind Hasbro and Takara Tomy announcing that they would be releasing the exact same action figures. Takara Tomy does occasionally still release action figures that have different paint jobs than Hasbro, such as the Takara releases of the Beast Wars characters from the Kingdom line, and then of course you got the premium finish characters, the action figures. So Takara Tomy still does churn out some repaints that are different from figures that have been released by Hasbro. But yeah, this is a bygone era of having separate figures in Japan and the US. So I babbled on much longer than I wanted to, so without further delay, let's get Ultra Magnus out of his box and take a close look at him in his robot mode. So I apologize, before we actually get to seeing Ultra Magnus in his robot mode, one thing I forgot to show off is that here on the bottom of the box you got a bunch of product warnings and disclaimers and Sad Pac-Man! So yeah, small choking parts are hazardous for small children. And then of course you got the instruction sheet with Ultra Magnus's bio, which is once again written in Japanese, since this was meant for Japanese release. Fortunately, the text specs are in both Japanese and English, so I can read you those really fast. And there's Alpha Trion once more. On the inside of the instruction sheet is the comic book, which again it's written more as a manga with a comedic storyline. So, and I won't be showing it off, but the Ultra Magnus's tech specs are: he has a strength of 9, an intelligence of 9, a speed of 6, an endurance of 8, a rank of 8, a courage of 9, fire blast of 6, and a skill of 8. So Ultra Magnus has just an above average amount of speed and firepower, but he has really high endurance in battle. He's a very high ranking Autobot, and he's extremely strong, smart, and courageous. So yeah, what Ultra Magnus lacks in speed and firepower, he makes up for with his strength and intelligence and his bravery. So yeah, he's a really tough opponent to face off against in battle. Alright, and so here is the Transformers Takara Legends LG Ultra Magnus out of his box, transformed into his robot mode. And yeah, as you can see, the parts of him that are done in white plastic, it's a very bright white. It's not like, it isn't an ivory off-white like it is on Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus. So one of the first differences you'll see bringing Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus back out for comparison. And of course the laser guns are different colors. They're white on Legends Ultra Magnus versus black on Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus. And again, that matches up with Ultra Magnus's laser guns being white in the Transformers movie and the 3rd season of the G1 cartoon. Versus the black laser guns the original action figure had. And again, bringing in the towers here for a comparison. As you can see there, the Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, it's more of an ivory white versus a solid white on Legends Ultra Magnus. And the shade of blue, hopefully my camera will pick up the differences if I bring the feet together. one moment, please. Sorry about the brief interruption there. My family's doing something, so this review might have some interruptions in it, but I don't know if my camera's going to be able to pick up the differences, but if I maybe do it right there, as you can see, Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, my camera's not picking it up well. You can see the differences more closely if you look at them with your own eyes, but Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus is a slightly brighter, muted blue hue versus Takara's Legends Ultra Magnus, which is a much darker and more vibrant blue. You can kind of see the difference right there if I angle it like that, but can't really see it if I put it the other way. But yeah, it's a much brighter, more prominent blue on Takara's Aura's Legends Ultra Magnus figure. So the paint layout is almost at a first glance, the paint layout's almost identical. The same parts on both versions of Ultra Magnus that are blue. They are blue. The head, the shoulders, the chest, the armor, the lower arms, the shoulders, and the lower legs are all done in blue plastic. The wheels are the same size. Eyes, of course, whereas if I hadn't customized my Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus figure, the wheels would be unpainted black, and they'd be silver only on the Takara version of Ultra Magnus. But you can kind of see right there where I customized with my silver paint. I couldn't go all the way down to the struts of the hubcaps, so they're actually painted on Legends Ultra Magnus, and I wasn't able to paint them with the paint I was using when I was customizing Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus. And that's pretty much it for the similarities. Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus has a lot more white parts than Legends Ultra Magnus. So to go over the differences as briefly as possible, the headlights on the chest S-tops for Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, it's only the front circle parts that are painted silver. The whole casing for the headlights is painted metallic gray on Legends Ultra Magnus. Agnes on Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, the eyes are painted bright blue, whereas on Legends Ultra Magnus they're unpainted silver, so it matches his face. But the center of the head crest is unpainted on Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus. It is painted charcoal gray or gunmetal gray inside Legends Ultra Magnus. His ears are painted white versus painted silver on the Hasbro version, and so I honestly don't know which version of the head I like more, or comparing these two to each other. I'd switch them out, but again, the blue wouldn't match up. Ultra Magnus has one single Autobot logo here on his chest versus the two Autobot logos Legends Ultra Magnus has on both of his shoulders. The center sections of the chest, which are unpainted, painted on Legends Ultra Magnus, but they're painted black on Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus. These two insets right in there, and being painted black on Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, it makes it look like a face, with those two parts of the chest being eyeballs, then the center being a nose, and then the two parts on either side being a frown on it. And once you see that it's a face, you can never unsee it. It looks less of a face with those parts being unpainted painted with those tricep muscles, with those quote-unquote tricep muscles being unpainted on Legends Ultra Magnus. The shade of red paint, it's more metallic on Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, and it's more shiny than on Legends Ultra Magnus. The headlights are the faux headlights. Oh no, they aren't the faux headlights. They are the headlights of the. They are fake. The faux headlights are this. They appear to be the exact same on both figures. I think the Combiner Wars might be a slightly brighter shade of orange than the Legends version, but that's pretty much it. Arms are the same layout. There's slightly more paint apps on the shoulders on Legends Ultra Magnus, where these bits sculpted in parts on the side that look like intake vents, they're painted yellow, whereas on Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus they're unpainted. For the rest of the shoulders, it's pretty much the same. And the arms, the missile pods, all have the same paint layout, although it's kind of hard for me to show it off, but if you look right there, that joint, which is a transformation joint when you transform the figure into alt mode, the transformation joint is red, so Legends Ultra Magnus has a bit of red on the inside of his elbow versus white on Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, and then the support that keeps the tractor cab attached to the trailer, it's white on Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, and it's red on Legends Ultra Magnus. The lower half of the robot mode is where the differences start to be seen. For the pelvis, it's actually done in white plastic on Legends Ultra Magnus, but it's covered in a layer of blue paint, so he has a blue painted pelvis versus an unpainted white pelvis on Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus. Another difference you might have already spotted is that the thighs are white on Combiner Wars versus red on Legends. And then the paint layout on the front legs on the shins is different. Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, he's got some silver there on those circle sculpted parts, and then some red on the pointed down trapezoids on his shins. The trapezoids are still red on Legends Ultra Magnus, but there's now blue paint apps around the knee spikes, and then on the knee spikes themselves, those sculpted in bits are painted yellow versus being unpainted on Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus. So as I said earlier in the review, there are a lot more paint apps on Legends Ultra Magnus than Combiner Wars. And then looking down here at the feet, as one of Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus' guns falls out of his hand, and this figure has never been able to hold his laser guns properly. The tiny little double jointed hinge joint that keeps the feet attached to the rest of the figure, they're white on Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, and then the feet themselves are unpainted. And then on Legends Ultra Magnus, the double hinge joint for the ankles that keep the feet attached, they're red, made out of red plastic, and then the inside of the top section of the foot is painted, if I bring one down, it's painted gunmetal gray. That part is unpainted on Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus. And then flipping them around to the back, as we saw, the trailer hitches was the word I was looking for. White on Combiner Wars, red on Legends, and then bringing down the back of the legs, the leg covers are red on Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus and blue with some red paint on Legends Ultra Magnus. And then of course it's kind of hard to see, but right here the back section of the torso, which is the front of the trailer in alt mode, it's red on Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus and it's blue on Legends Ultra Magnus. So Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus has a lot more red parts to him than Legends Ultra Magnus does. But overall, in terms of which figure has the better paint apps, because this figure originally didn't have painted hubcaps on the wheels, Takara Tomy wins the round of having the better paint job. And as far as gimmicks goes, the main gimmick is that you can plug the two laser guns. You can't plug the more pointed one into the back of this one. It's only in this conversion, but you can give Ultra Magnus a really long laser gun rifle if you want. Although the way the hands on this version of on this mold are sculpted, the open fingers, while it was a fresh new gimmick to see back in 2015, especially with a Hasbro released action figure, it was something you didn't see that often. Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus is one of the figures where the open hand gimmick didn't really work that successfully. And then of course the other gimmick is that you can combine, if you put the weapons in like this with Ultra Magnus, you can then detach the missile pods from his shoulders and attach them to the top of this, and then he has the Ultra Magnus hammer that he had in Transformers Animated. I won't attach the missile pods right now because it still kind of looks like a hammer, though with just a very small head to it with the way it's shaped. But yeah, you get the idea. So it's a hammer with 4 missile pods, so you can have it go whack and then boom, it explodes. So fun little gimmick weapon that the figure can do. Ooh, so that's really great. And if you want him to have the holding the hammer with the handle held up so it looks like he's holding it down, upside down, then you can do that as well. So you have options. But yeah, that is pretty much it for Transformers Armors Legends LG Ultra Magnus in his robot mode. Here he is one last time for one last size comparison with Combiner Wars, or his Ultra Magnus. And now that I have him in this light, you can kind of see the difference in the blues between the two of them. But yeah, it's pretty nice to have a figure that I never thought I was going to have in my Transformers section. One last difference I will point out between the two of them is that right up here on the top of the shoulder towers, and this is something that's always been true with Hasbro and Takara Tomy. If you look right here, Hasbro used to use silver screws for their Transformers figures, while Takara Tomy uses black screws on their Transformers figures. Screws have become less common with Transformers action figures these days, since Hasbro and Takara Tomy only have realized that metal pins are cheaper to use to pull parts that aren't designed to separate together. So that was just one last little difference I wanted to show off. So let's hurry up and get this review wrapped up by taking a close look at Ultra Magnus in his alt mode. Okay, so before we actually get into Ultra Magnus, let's take a look at one of the big differences between the Hasbro and Takara Tomy releases, and it is the fact that you get different partner robots with both figures. So here is Alpha Trion next to Minimus Ambus. So I already went through Minimus Ambus's backstory at the start of the review, so this will primarily be looking at the differences in paint apps between the two of them. They are the same mold, it's the exact same head sculpt too, same chest used for both Minimus Ambus and Alpha Trion. It's just a difference of paint job. There are a lot more paint apps on Alpha Trion's face than there are on Minimus Ambus, although Minimus Ambus being almost entirely white with just some neon yellow highlights, along with his beard and mustache being black. It's actually a light shade of gray, and it's hard for my camera to pick it up because their faces are so tiny. But Minimus Ambus being almost entirely white is accurate to his appearance in IDW's comic books. So there's nothing really too special about them. The only articulation they have is the arms are attached at the shoulder joint via elbow joints, so the arms can spin clockwise and counterclockwise 360 degrees. Legs are attached at ball joints, but you have to either detach the backpack, which unfortunately the arms are attached to, or lift it out of the way to get the backward leg movement there. So, and hinge joint at the knee, partially due to how they sit inside the chest of Ultra Magnus when they travel inside of it. But yeah, this was the first transforming Alpha Trion action figure that was released since the BotCon exclusive Alpha Trion figure had been released in, I can't remember if it was 2005 or 2006 when BotCon Alpha Trion was released. I just called him Ultra Magnus. But yeah, this was the first transforming Alpha Trion figure since the BotCon figure that was a repaint of the original Cybertron Voyager class Vector Prime figure was released. So this new version of Alpha Trion was a nice welcome, since I've said this, I said this on live streams before, but I can't remember which of my reviews I said on before, but I'll say it again. I believe I said it on my review of Legacy Alpha Trion, but action figures of Alpha Trion are far few in number. So whenever a new Alpha Trion action figure gets released, it's a welcome by most Transformers fans and collectors. So yeah, pretty impressive looking Alpha Trion figure here. The windows are painted silver. He does have an Autobot logo on his backpack, almost in the same spot that Minimus Ambus does. The intake vents on Minimus Ambus's shins are painted. They're not painted on Alpha Trion, but he does have more paint apps in the torso. It's I believe it's Alpha Trion's torso. I believe it's white plastic. It's just been entirely covered with a layer of red paint, and then he's got another layer of blue and white paint on his chest and on his robot mode pelvis. So yeah, a lot more paint apps on Alpha Trion compared to Minimus Ambus. But yeah, both still pretty enjoyable. To transform the figure, it's fairly easy, but the hinge joint that moves the backpack up and out of the way. It's really tight on both Hasbro and Takara Tomy's figures, so to transform this figure, you just lift the backpack up. It's on a double hinge joint, but again, it's really tight. Right? At least on Alpha Trion, they fixed the issue of it popping off on the time. On Minimus Ambus, it pops off, and it pops off so easily, it's actually easier to transform Minimus Ambus with his arms and back section popped off from the front section, so get it transformed. And here's Alpha Trion in his vehicle mode of a Cybertronian hover car. He's got 4 little struts hanging off the bottom of him, and my camera's blurring it out. I said 4, it's actually 3. He's got 1 in the center, enter right here, and then he's got 2 on the robot mode shoulders, so those are the 3 little struts that are supposed to mimic wheels. But yeah, it's a little Cybertronian hover car. Get Minimus Ambus transformed really fast. And of course, the one time when I'm actually recording a review and showing him off transforming, it didn't pop off, it stayed on. But yeah, there's Alpha Trion compared to Minimus Ambus. A lot more paint apps on Alpha Trion versus Minimus Ambus, but it is accurate to their appearances from the cartoons and comic books that they appeared in. Sorry, I held them low. But yeah, there's Alpha Trion next to Minimus Ambus. Let me know which of these you preferred, if you prefer Minimus Ambus over Alpha Trion. But here is Legends Ultra Magnus in his vehicle mode. You can see a very nice, bright, vibrant shade of blue. Takara Tomy was going for cartoon accuracy to the Generation 1 movie and 3rd season, which Ultra Magnus appeared in, so he has a lot more blue to him. And they at least painted the center section red, so and then these side bits here are red, so there is some red to Ultra Magnus. This transformation hinge is made out of red plastic, so it results in a red rectangle on the roof of the tractor cab. And you can extend the I'll show it here so you can see. You can extend the tractor cab out from the trailer by sliding it up and down the trailer hitch. The downward position is where it goes for robot mode, so you bring it forward for alt mode, and now Ultra Magnus has a full 360-degree turn. And this back section here, that back there on the back of the tractor cab, it's red plastic, it's white plastic on Hasbro's Ultra Magnus figure. That's actually not a joint for robot mode, that's actually a transformation joint, because when you transform the figure into robot mode, you have to spin it around 360 degrees, so the transformation joint there is red plastic on Legends Ultra Magnus. And you see, yeah, he's got quite a range of movement in vehicle mode. I'm sliding it back in because it's easier to have it in that position when I bring out Combinowars Ultra Magnus for a size comparison. So here is Hasbro versus Takara's Ultra Magnus compared to each other. And again, these were the physically tallest Ultra Magnus action figures that were released by Hasbro. This mold was until Studio Series 86 Ultra Magnus came out last year in 2024. So yeah, a lot more red on the Hasbro Ultra Magnus versus the more blue parts on Takara's Ultra Magnus here for the 2015 leader class figure. So yeah, this is the old school size, leader class size, where it stood close to 10 inches tall. All versus modern leaders, which are about 8.5 inches tall. Oh, so yeah, pretty large sized Ultra Magnus action figure. One last thing that I did want to share with you guys, and I've seen very few reviews actually doing this, but both Hasbro's Combinowars Ultra Magnus and Takara Tomy for Legends Ultra Magnus, they kind of, in the product photos, those are both the American and Japanese releases of this figure. They allude to there being no place to actually attach Alpha Trion and Minimus Ambus onto Ultra Magnus when he's in his alt mode, but that's not true. There is a storage spot for them, so it's kind of hard to tell from the support towers, but if you look right here where my finger is, there are 3 sculpted grooves here on the inside of Ultra Magnus' trailer, and then it continues to 1 here on the back where it's painted red. And what those are that is the spot where, as I said earlier, there's 3 little tiny struts hanging off the bottom of the alt mode for Alpha Trion and Minimus Ambus. And what you do is you use those 3 sculpted lines here on Ultra Magnus' alt mode mode, and that is actually the spot where you store Alpha Trion and Minimus Ambus. So yeah, they're utilizing the car carrier trailer. So I figured that out on my own when I was wondering why those lines were in there. And there you can have Ultra Magnus and Minimus Ambus facing either forwards or backwards. But yeah, that spot on the bottom lower section of the trailer is where you store it. Minimus Ambus rolls a lot more freely than Alpha Trion is doing. I don't know if it's because Alpha Trion is fresh out of the box and he's being attached there for the first time. But I believe, if I remember correctly, Minimus Ambus always didn't really fit in there too securely. He was loose, so. Noticing Alpha Trion's having a little more difficulty because facing the forward section, because the outward lines here have a layer of red paint on them. So unfortunately Alpha Trion may end up having to face backwards so he can sit in place securely. But yeah, that's the storage space for Minimus Ambus and Alpha Trion when they're in when Ultra Magnus is in his alt mode. I joked to myself after I found the storage space, like for instance using the Combiner Wars figure as an example for it, or it's a funny, I don't know if this was done intentionally by Hasbro and Takara Tomy and they just decided to abandon it, but it's almost like a joke where you look at Ultra Magnus head on you're like, wow, it's Ultra Magnus, and then you turn to the side, nope, it's actually Minimus Ambus controlling Ultra Magnus. So I don't know if that was just a joke that Hasbro and Takara Tomy decided to abandon because the idea of Ultra Magnus being a lifeless body controlled by Minimus Ambus was one that wasn't too well received by most Transformers fans when IDW released it. But yeah, that's just a little fun thing to do there. So it's like here on Legends Ultra Magnus, is that really Ultra Magnus? Nope, he's being controlled by Alpha Trion. So yeah. So overall, a pretty great looking Ultra Magnus action figure. For those G1 purists out there who complain all the time, this mold unfortunately is not entirely Transformers Generation 1 accurate, because the way the tractor cab transforms, it can't transform into the inner robot that the G1 action figure could do. And unfortunately that's one thing that a lot of modern Ultra Magnus action figures have done, is that they instead of having both gimmicks, the inner transforming robot figure is the first gimmick before I go on. The second gimmick is Ultra Magnus being a working car carrier with his trailer. Here on the 2015 Leader Class mold, I think I showed this off when I eventually looked when I did a review of Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, but maybe I didn't. But I figured out myself. You can either store 2 deluxe figures here on the 2015 Ultra Magnus figure, or you can store 4 Legends class figures, and that's with these sculpted parts that end up here on the top part. There are spots for tires to rest on. You do have to remove Minimus Ambus / Alpha Trion from Ion if you want, but if you want to see a lot of cars using Ultra Magnus's car carrier trailer, then you can store 4 Legends class figures or Core class figures on the trailer as well. There's only one Voyager class mold that fits on this trailer, and it only fits on the top of the trailer, and it's the Combiner Wars Hotspot mold, which was also repainted and retooled into Combiner Wars Onslaught and also Power of the Primes Inferno. So the 2 gimmicks that the original Generation 1 Ultra Magnus action figure possessed was a transforming tractor cab robot that looked like, which a lot of Transformers fans and collectors to this day, they incorrectly call it White Optimus Prime. It's not Optimus Prime, it's still Ultra Magnus. But yeah, Ultra Magnus' inner robot and his trailer being a working car carrier that can actually carry other Transformers action figures in it. Those are the 2 gimmicks that the original Generation 1 Ultra Magnus action figure had from the Diaclone owned robots line, and most modern Ultra Magnus action figures, unfortunately to this day, they either have either one or the other of those 2 gimmicks that the original G1 Ultra Magnus figure possessed. as there is an upgrade kit out there that exists for this, which has a transforming cab robot for this mold, Combiner Wars / Legends Ultra Magnus figure. It was released by Fans Project in their Perfect Effect, and I'm sorry, it was released by not Fans Project, Perfect Effect in their line of upgrade kits for Transformers figures that were coming out back then during the mid 2010s. And so there's also a knockoff of Perfect Effect's transforming tractor cab robot. I can't remember the name of the third-party company. It had a name that's not as easy to remember, but yeah, there are upgrade kits where you can swap out the non-transforming cab robot with a transforming inner robot tractor cab. So if you can get either Perfect Effects or the AO transforming cab robot upgrade kit, then this is the only modern Ultra Magnus figure that with that upgrade kit that has the same both gimmicks of the original Generation 1 Ultra Magnus action figure without it Legends / Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, along with Masterpiece Ultra Magnus and also Studio Series 86 Ultra Magnus. Those figures have the one gimmick of having a working car carrying trailer, while the other modern Ultra Magnus action figures that have been released have the even with upgrade kits, they have the one gimmick they retain is the transforming tractor cab robot. Those figures include Siege Ultra Magnus, Kingdom Ultra Magnus, and a third one that comes to mind is Classics Ultra Magnus. Classics Ultra Magnus originally was just the tractor cab robot, and it's the reason why I blurred out the word Fans Project a moment ago, because after that figure was released, Fans Project was one of the first third-party companies to come onto the scene, and they created an entire trailer upgrade kit for the original Classics Ultra Magnus action figure. So because Studio Series 86 Ultra Magnus doesn't have the transforming tractor cab robot, the White Optimus Prime, as fans continue to incorrectly call all Ultra Magnus's inner robot mode, because it never actually appeared in the G1 cartoon back in the 1980s. That's why the Studio Series 86 Ultra Magnus figure doesn't have it. To this day, the only Ultra Magnus action figure that possesses Ultra Magnus's two primary gimmicks of having the inner robot and the working car carrier trailer, the only figure that does so is the original Generation 1 Ultra Magnus action figure. If you count upgrade kits, this figure technically is the second one to do that. I missed out, unfortunately, on getting Perfect Effects a transforming tractor cab robot for Ultra Magnus. Whenever I would see it online, I thought it was too expensive for me to get at the time, because back in 2015 I was struggling my way through college and the economy wasn't doing that well, so I was just barely making enough money to afford extra money to afford to add the official Hasbro Transformers products to my Transformers collection back then. And so whether or not I'll ever get Perfect Effects upgrade kit or even the knockoff version is uncertain at this point. But considering the fact that this mold came out 15 years ago, I really hope that instead a third-party company is working on releasing a tractor cab robot for Studio Series 86 Ultra Magnus there. When I get around to reviewing that figure, I will bring out Legends Ultra Magnus for a size comparison so you guys can see the size similarities between those two figures. But yeah, this has been my review of Transformers Legend the Takara Tomy exclusive Transformers Legends OG Leader Class Ultra Magnus figure. This figure came out in 2015, so I can't believe it's been 10 years since it and Hasbro's Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus figures were unleashed. And the main reason I got this figure was because, as I said, I customized the wheels. So here's what the unbroken wheels sound like. So even on the trailer, the figure rolls fairly well. There is very low clearance space on the trailer due to all the Robot Mode cable back there, and the wheels on the trailer being really wide spread out. They're in fact farther apart than the width of the tractor cab. So unfortunately, this version of Ultra Magnus, it only rolls around successfully on a flat surface. But when I accidentally broke the wheels on my Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, as you can see right there, and also here. I didn't break the wheels on the tractor cab, so they still spin fairly freely, but on the trailers, the wheels are just a total mess now. So yeah, this one no longer has proper spinning wheels in alt mode, so that's the main reason I got this version of Ultra Magnus and added it to my Transformers collection. So, yes, pretty fantastic looking Ultra Magnus action figure. So, thank you to Takara Tomy for releasing this figure. So, normally when I end my reviews, I ask the proverbial question of whether I recommend getting the figure or not. I don't review older vintage Transformers action figures that often, so I try to avoid asking that question, but just for the sake of doing it to make the review similar to my other Transformers reviews, do I recommend getting the Transformers Takara Tomy exclusive Legends LG Ultra Magnus figure and adding it to your Transformers collection? I only recommend getting it if you get it for the reason I did, which is because you accidentally broke a part of your copy of Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, and I only recommend getting this figure if you enjoy this version of Ultra Magnus more than Combiner Wars, and if you're able to find it if on that very rare, most rarest of occasions, like I found myself, you find it going for a cheaper price than Hasbro's Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, that's another reason I would recommend getting this figure. But if you already have Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus, and if you also have the Studio Series 86 Commander Class Ultra Magnus action figure that came out last year in 2024, then this figure is an easy pass. And that's because this is an action figure of Ultra Magnus that, as of this video's recording in 2025, this figure came out 10 years ago, in 2015, so it's only one of those rare action figures where if you didn't get it back when it was first released, the only motivation to getting it is if it's an action figure of a character that you really enjoy, or if it's an action figure of a character that you really want to have in your Transformers collection. So, yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say. Alpha Trion's proving difficult on camera as I try to wrap up the review, but yeah, I only recommend getting this figure if you're an avid fan of Ultra Magnus, and if, like me, you want to replace your copy of Hasbro's Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus and get this mold. As I said, this mold has been used 3 times, although the third release of the mold, the Platinum Edition Autobot Stand Ultra Magnus figure that was sold in a 5-pack, that's even rarer than Takara's Legends Ultra Magnus figure, so if you can find that version on eBay or somewhere for a decent price, then a thumbs up to you for doing that. But yeah, I only recommend getting this if you're an avid Transformers collector, and if you're a fan of Ultra Magnus. If you're not really into buying Transformers action figures that were released during the year 2015, then this figure is an easy pass, and I'm repeating myself, so before I keep going on like a broken record, that's pretty much all I have to say about Transformers Legends LG Ultra Magnus. Very nice Takara Tomy exclusive Transformers figure. So thank you guys all so much for watching. Thank you to all my subscribers for your continued support. This has been the TFangy. I apologize that the review is almost an hour long, but thank you guys all so much for bearing with me throughout the review. Until next time, I'm you guys. Please remember to stay safe, stay healthy, transform, and roll out. Goodbye, everyone.